Greetings. On behalf of the Breath Project and AKILA WorkSongs, a communications agency, I welcome you to the Reparations Above and Beyond, a panel discussion on slavery reparations in the United States. I am Beasley, Arts and Activism Manager and Production Specialist at AKILA WorkSongs. Tonight, I will serve as the event's virtual manager. So I have a special note for everyone. Please have your view on speaker for the duration of this conversation. We don't want you to miss anything that comes from the panelists. So we'd like to start this evening by having the co-founders of the Breath Project introduce themselves and the motivation behind this conversation. So please help me welcome Gamal, Chasten, and Marieke Gaoubry. Hello, Gamal. Hello, Marieke.
Hello. Good evening, good afternoon, all depending on where you're chiming in from. My name is Gamal Abdel Chasten. I'm co-founder of the Breath Project. And Marieke?
I'm Marieke Gaoubry, and I'm Gamal's co-founder with the Breath Project as well. We've been working on this reparations project for about 2 years with a main goal of getting these conversations into universities and schools. And so a particular welcome to any professors and students who are attending today's conversation. Also, we'd love to just give a shout out to John Ray, a civil law attorney who's based in Chicago, who's been working on this material with us for over a year of putting together mock trial materials to get these into classrooms. And this conversation is a huge step forward in this event for us. And we're just really grateful to all the panelists and to everybody who's attending today.
Yes, and this discussion is an extension or part of this multi-year project, which is known as the Reparations Project, which the Breath Projects, like Marieke said, started on about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. So that said, again, we're so thrilled to have the panelists here, all the participants and all the attendees, and we look forward to a deep and informative discussion. Thank you. We're going to turn it back over to our host for the evening and our moderator, which is April Silver of AKILA WorkSongs.
Thank you, Gamal. Thank you, Marieke. And thank you everyone else that's brought us here to this moment. So before we bring on our moderator, I'd like to give you a little background on who she is. Tonight's moderator and producer, April R. Silver, founded AKILA WorkSongs, a public relations firm based in New York in 1993. Her successes: she has been mentioned, featured in Ms., Essence, Time, Roland Martin Unfiltered, as well as CNN, BET, Tom Joyner Morning Show, and other outlets. As a writer, Silver's essays have been published in the New York Daily News, World Beats, Life, and various blogs. She is the editor of Be a Father to Your Child, a work that HuffPost Black Voices cites as a powerful and groundbreaking anthology. Silver is working on her second book about Black women artists, activists, and healers. Among her hundreds of business endeavors and community service projects over the years, Silver founded the organization CoMotion in response to the killing of Amadou Diallo, served as interim executive director for Nkiru Center for Education and Culture, the nonprofit organization and bookstore co-founded by Talib Kweli and Yassine Bey, AKA Mos Def, and continues to volunteer and help finance a variety of cultural and social justice initiatives in the US and in West Africa. Please welcome our moderator, April R. Silver.
All righty. Good evening, family. Good evening, Mo. How are you? Again, I wanted to definitely, I hope everyone can hear me okay, but I definitely wanted to welcome everyone to this important program. I'm very grateful to the moderators who you're going to meet in just a little bit. And I want to say a special thank you to Gamal and Marieke of the Breath Project, and make sure that they get their props, of course, for conceiving of this and then tapping me on the shoulder to see if I can pull together some important voices on this topic of reparations. So I can say buckle up. I can say to you all are welcome. I can say that we're going to have a conversation in this panel discussion, but there's also going to be an opportunity, of course, for your questions to be addressed toward the end. So this is a place where you definitely want to Take notes. I think you're going to learn, we think you're going to learn a lot for sure. And we will share that this, as you know, is being recorded, and this conversation, this particular discussion will have a long life beyond this moment in time on this April 18th. It will be on YouTube rather immediately, so we can share with our family, with students, mentees, and such. So definitely enjoy, and let's get ready. I'll be doing some introductions of the panelists. You've seen their names, but before we really get started, it is important, we believe collectively, that we start this program by paying homage to those in the reparations movement who have been making sacrifices through blood, sweat, and tears, facing ridicule for when this topic was not popular. It wasn't a trending topic anywhere. This work goes back for centuries, this reparations movement and this examination of what it means to right the wrongs that have been done, particularly in the United States, to people of African ancestry. So in order to properly and in a very simple but meaningful way, we have to pay homage to our ancestors, and there's no better person to do so, from my understanding, than to bring on Chief Ayanda Clarke. So I want to first introduce who he is, for many who might not know, and just for the record, I'm going to do a microscopic reading of a little bit of his background, and then you'll understand why it's appropriate that we pay homage to our ancestors before we jump into this topic. So Chief Ayanda, the proper pronunciation is Chief Ayanda Ifadara Clarke, who we affectionately call Chief Ayanda, is a spiritual health counselor and healer and African traditionalist. He serves as an initiate of Ifa, an initiate of Orisha, and an initiate of Egungun, or ancestors. He is also a born and raised Brooklynite, who is a proud African man. Yes, he is a graduate of the Dalton School. Yes, he is a graduate of Wesleyan University, but bigger and deeper and more important than all of that, he is a man that knows his Africanness. He's a traditionalist. He is also the founder of the FADARA Group LLC, and he's the founder of the Brooklyn-based Ile Otorpo Sokun Ifa Temple, of which I am a member. So as an arts educator, as a Grammy Award-winning musician, as an amazing healer, and as my Oluo, my teacher, it gives me great honor and distinction to welcome to someone you're going to hear from tonight, but first, someone who's going to help us to pay homage in a meaningful way to our ancestors. Chief Ayanda, it's so good to see you. Abro Aboye Aboshishe.
Thank you, April. Thank you for the introduction. Good to see you again. Good to see you, Mo. Good to see. Thank you to Jamal and Marieke and the Breath Project for inviting us here today. And April, as you said, it's appropriate and necessary to first contextualize any conversation that we're having about reparations, or really any conversation that we as a collective people are having, to pay homage to those who have come before us. And so in order to do so, we first start by giving praise to the creator of all that we know, all that we don't know, whichever name you know that creator. We give praise to the creator and give thanks for being able to take the breath of life in our lungs today. Thank you. Olo Dumare, give praise to you. And we thank you for allowing us to take the breath of life in our lungs. Thank you for allowing us to see the dawning of this day. Thank you for allowing us to engage in conversation and discussion and dialogue that will propel us toward the areas of light. For in the presence of light, darkness and negativity must pack and flee. So, Tiwombada, Gunda Bodo Besile, Omo Wafeje, Omo Wafemu. Ọmọ wa fi tìbálẹ̀ lẹ́ adífá fún Olódùmarè ká sì ń ra pátákárẹ̀ ayé kó sí ń tọ́ Ọlọ́run kò lẹ́sẹ̀. Bó bá sójọ àsọdá àmùkántútó àṣẹká àmóbí òye kó sí ń tọ́ Ọlọ́run kò lẹ́sẹ̀ ìṣe Ọlọ́run ga ọmọjú tìyẹn níyàn lọ. We proudly and thankfully give praise to the Creator and all of creation, and by extension give praise to those who have come before us in this fight. Those that have come before us, who have advocated, who have fought for, who have defended, who have protected, who have sacrificed for all of us to be able to be here. We give praise to you. That spirit of of rebellion, that spirit of defense, that spirit of advocation for our community is what runs through our veins. And so we say, "Asopuponi ododo ye adifa fun egun torumbo waye uleni nidafasi ruru ebo atuda edu kawabani wawore." The blood that runs through our veins is the same blood that ran through the veins of our ancestors, those who struggled, those who fought, those who defended, those who advocated, those who petitioned, those who sacrificed. And so we are grateful, and we call on all of those spiritual energies, all of those spiritual warriors who have come before us to empower us today, continue the fight through us today, the fight for balance, the fight for healing, the fight for respect, the fight for justice. And we are grateful to be able to continue in the legacy of those who have come before us. Thank you, April, for allowing us to take time to acknowledge those warriors.
Thank you for lifting up, one thing that you've taught us, no matter what one's spiritual or religious connection is or is not, there's one thing that we can't deny is that we all have ancestors. No matter what corner of the world, no matter what our race, gender, size, whatever ism, whatever label, like nobody is here without an ancestor. So it is in that way that we want to give praise and honor. So thank you for teaching us that and reminding us of that, and making sure we cleanse the palate, as you say sometimes, to move forward. So everyone, like I said, buckle up. We're going to go into our conversation, but I think what I want to do is start with a basic core elementary definition of reparations. It does us no good if we don't have a starting point, right? So in a basic way, I just want to talk about reparations from the standpoint of it being the paying of amends for damage that was done to an injured or damaged or defeated state. Dictionary definition, but here is where we get to see how that applies to the people of African ancestry here in the United States. And we know, because we're broad-minded people, that conversation, per the title of this event, is going to go above and beyond that. So one at a time, I'm going to introduce our panelists. They're going to turn on their video when I call their names, and we'll go that way. And the first person that I really want to bring to the forefront is Akanke Washington. I'm going to give you a technical bio or blurb of her. So I'm not going to dwell on the fact that she's my best friend and we've known each other for 30 years. And I'm going to explain all of that, more than 30 years. But for the context of here, Akanke Washington is a mother, an educator, a writer, and an Orisha priest. She is also the social studies curriculum specialist for the entire Philadelphia School District. She serves as on the board of her hometown community. By being on the board of the Roosevelt Children's Academy is how she serves her hometown in Long Island, New York. And she also organizes, and this is a particular reason why I think she has great standing here. She organizes group trips for students on 10-day pilgrimages to Ghana. Akanke, you'll tell us how long you've been doing that later. She writes, she's an author, like I said, of children's books when she has spare time. But here's an interesting fact that I will share. I said this before, but I don't think there's a human being on the planet that reads and consumes and references books the way that she does. There's an intellectual strength here that is unparalleled, that is above average, and her analytical skills are pristine. And her political education and the work that we did at Howard University as student activists wasn't a trend It is who she is. So Akanke, thank you for agreeing, coming out from behind the scenes to join this conversation. I have a question for you before I introduce one by one the other panelists. It is because
Thank you for having me. And I also want to say thank you to the Breath Project for making space for the conversation.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You and I've had over the years all kinds of conversations about this. The social justice work that we've been involved in is organic to us. Your activism, your political education is why I want to ask you this question, right? And the question being, from your point of view as an educator, as someone that's regular on the ground doing this work behind the scenes oftentimes, what is it do you think that people get wrong about this concept of reparations? What do you wish people walked away with more than what they have right now?
It's a long list. So I write social studies curriculum. And it often, that means that I'm often in conversation with young people. And unfortunately, they're learning a lot of their history from YouTube, right? So there's a lot of chatter on YouTube around reparations and in the broader social media that focuses on closing the wealth gap, right? And reparations as a tool to close the wealth gap that was, of course, created because of the enslavement of African people, and then every system after that, Jim Crow, housing discrimination, job discrimination, and mass incarceration. And there's probably some other in there I could throw in there, right? But if we accept that reparations at the root means to repair, the damage is more than economic, right? The damage is much broader than the wealth gap. And closing the wealth gap doesn't address the systems that were put in place to create the wealth gap. It doesn't address that we live in a white supremacist capitalist structure. And with that being, there always needs to be an oppressed class and an underclass. So the conversation is about having wealth so that we can integrate into the empire. It is not about how do we dismantle the systems that made our enslavement necessary in the first place. And so I think I don't want to discount that people are suffering, that poverty is painful, and that people need a way out of poverty. I don't want to minimize that, but I want to amplify that if we don't address the systems, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gash.
Yeah,
So
I
try to get my students to understand that broadly.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Is this conversation around the wealth gap is front and center, but per the title of this program, Reparations Above and Beyond, what might be the popular things to say?
I also, can I add one more thing?
Please.
I also feel like, I don't even know if I should say this, but I also feel like we have a myopic view of our history that starts with 1619, right? And I want my students, I take them to Ghana. When we go to Ghana, the dungeons were built in 1400s, right? If we have a Pan-African perspective, if we're talking about the enslaved people who came here as African people, the attack on African people did not start in 1619, right? And so if we have a Pan-African approach, we cannot limit our oppression to just what happened on the shores. We can't center the formation of America if we have a Pan-African approach for us as African people.
I would agree. But you and I both know there are people, they got a long way to go before they identify themselves as Pan-Africanists, right? and that's part of the work for a lot of people as well. I think it's a worthy journey, but you know, that might not be everybody's path. But I do agree. Can I just, Akanke, I'm going to be doing some inserts in between, and you made me think of, because you brought in the conversation, I want to take this as an opportunity to broaden the conversation and pay homage, since we're paying homage to our ancestors. I saw, for example, in Nkechi Taifa, I hope she's in the audience. I saw that she had registered, but there are a lot of people, like we talked about, you know, in the green room, that have been doing this work for such a long time, that have been, you know, while we were sleeping, some of us, they've been doing this work for decades. It is in their bloodstream, like blood is. So, oh yes, Nkechi is in the audience, so I got that. So shout out to her and her new book. We'll put her information out as a resource link. But her and so many others, you made me think of, just broadening the conversation beyond us. We'll put in the chat, in Cobra, as well as the organization, started the year after I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1987. So that organization is a good resource. So the teacher in me, Akanke, wanted to make sure that we connect as many dots for those who are new to this conversation, right? That's important. So I'm going to be doing that a little bit in between, but this is going to be my segue to bring on the next panelists. So please stay on the screen. But I want to bring on Rhymefest to the conversation, because I have a prompt for him as well. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Sis. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Can I do the very basic thing and read your bio for those who might not know? But we have Che Rhymefest Smith with us, as a recording artist, a songwriter, a humanitarian, and a trailblazer in hip hop culture. For real, for real. He's being modest because he could have on his mantle right now Grammys and Golden Globe Awards that are all his, with his name on it. Like, he's at that level. But what I love about his work, that he's in that level, but has never left the ground, so to speak, with his activism work with young people. He's a native of Chicago, and is doing work. He's always fusing his love of music and community service. And you co-founded the nonprofit organization Art of Change, which is dedicated to youth development. Like, that's the microscopic version of what you do. But I want to also just add in there, this man is an intellectual. He is a thinker, nonstop thinking all the time. And I want to share also that I had the pleasure of him being in a book that I did in 2008, Be a Father to Your Child. So go cop that. He's a part of that. That's how we first met. So thank you, sir, for bringing, you're about to drop some science, but I'm gonna ask you a very specific question. And you got to clean it up, because I'm not an artist, so I'm gonna mess this up. But I heard that you said something along the lines of, you never heard of a thief giving refunds. So you got to clean that up and put your artistic spin on it. Then we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's a bar from one of my projects getting ready to come out, honoring James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. And one of the lines I said was, I know we want reparations, and that ain't charity, but if you get it, that'll be the last time we see prosperity. I never heard of a thief giving a refund. Ain't no reparations, just Section 8 and a Nissan. So, you know, what I meant by that is this. It's not that there's, to Sister Akanke's word, it's not that there hasn't been injustice and that there isn't pain or justice due. It's, what can we use our energy to do that is productive to the majority of us experiencing our own power. So, you know, I think that to go to the person who stole the justice, who is currently stealing the justice, and try to redeem power or elicit some type of apology or empathy for what they are doing, have done and are doing as a system, not even as an individual person, but a system, I think could be a waste of energy when we could actually be taking the currency that we currently have and building something that surpasses what we perceive as lost.
But what would you say to people who are like, pay me what you owe me?
I think that is, you're thinking like a white supremacist. That's a capitalistic view of things. That is not of service, that is self-serving. And I think that when we go into the DNA of the global DNA of our people, we are hosts, we are gracious, we can't act like them and then get the results that we are to have as a blessing. They can't be our teachers. And I think that pay me what you owe me is a it's like a the mindset of that is that of a dictator.
Well, this is why I wanted you here, right? Because I know you got opinions, but there's another, if I may be the moderator for a second.
Because who owes you what? Nothing. Nobody owes nobody nothing.
But
I mean, I can see how just, you know.
I hear what you're saying. I don't agree. And I'm not taking a stance yet, but just for the sake of putting this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is, as we say, there are universal principles. There is a universal principle that is fundamental that says that is about give and take, that is honorable and equitable. It doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily negative or base or crude, right? The universe operates on give and take. So if we have two parties, and in this case, we're talking about groups of human beings, where one party has taken more and done damage and death and murder and rape, and then benefited from those actions that was stolen, straight up stolen, not asked politely, nothing was gracious about it. Can one not make an argument based on universal principle alone? We could strip away race, we could strip away gender, we could strip away all the things that are identifying marks as human beings, right? But on the universal principle alone of give and take and being not equal but equitable, can one not make the argument that there is an imbalance here that needs to be restored, however it manifests, materially, culturally, or whatever? Can one not make that argument without putting it in the context of a European white supremacist point of view? Is it possible that that's a universal principle that ain't got nothing to do with white people?
Well, here's the thing. Once we start talking how much in dollars and cents do you owe me, now you're dealing in their system. That same system has kept Africans off the International Monetary Fund so that they can go and dig the gold all they want, but they can't trade it in the world market, because that would make them as Africans more dangerous than any other continent in the world. So they keep them from that. I think when we talk about universal justice and universal principle, that doesn't always happen through our conscious desires. You know, we want the money, we want the land. That's not how the universal principles work. That happens on like a breathing kind of in and out thing that is controlled by time and incremental movement. So yes, this conversation is productive in a way that it will move forward over generations. However, I think that there are things that we can do as a collective right now that could turbo boost our process. I think by going to them for our universal justice, it's kind of like spinning your wheels in oil. There are bigger things we could be doing with that energy.
I agree. And I think that this is about having a whole conversation about what reparations is, because to narrow it down to matter, to material things, is limited. But I would like to enter into the room the idea that when we say reparations, there's a training that happens that makes people think that we're automatically talking about economics, that we're automatically talking about land, and that we're automatically talking about what white people did to Black people and they got to pay. There's a larger conversation that is not owned by white people, that is around universal justice. And then we get to decide, as those who were injured, what it manifests as. So that's all I wanted to enter into the conversation. But this is why I wanted you to be here, because we can have that. Akanke, I'll ask you, and then we want to bring on Nana Osei, okay? I'll ask you, yes.
Just real quick. I kind of feel like Baba Ayanda should be jumping in here, right? I am an initiate of Ifa, and there are a million Odu where someone was aggrieved, they lost something, money was taken, land was taken, and the justice was they get it back and then some, right? So the idea that money is owed is not Western. The idea that land is owned is not Western. It is not. We have, and I'm sure Baba could chant it, right? And I could give you stories, but I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the stories. Somebody asked me what I was reading earlier, and I'm reading the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. It's a historical fiction. And there's a Native American community where there was a murder that occurred. And the justice was like, if you have to replace that life, because that life was someone who worked on the land, who tilled the land, who helped take care of the mother. So the idea of like the justice of replacing and making whole, even when it's money and land, that don't belong to white people. It doesn't. Indigenous, the problem is with white people, there is no justice. The problem is there's no damn rules. Because with African people and indigenous people, there was always the idea, like April said, there has to be balance and you have to pay what you owe. Now, how we get it is the question, is for me, that's the question. Not whether or not there is a debt owed, not whether or not it should be financial, but how do we get it? And then how do we make sure it stops?
Yeah. I think yeah.
April, can I we need to bring in the rest of the panelists, but just because I was invited by my dear sister Akanke, I will jump in. And what I think this conversation is going to bring out is that that when we talk about reparations, we're talking about such a deep a concept of restoration of justice, right? And justice doesn't look only like dollars and cents. Justice doesn't look only like land and opportunity, right? And so what we're hearing is the pain. What we're hearing is the hurt. What we're hearing is the trauma and the effects of the trauma and what that has caused. And it brings about anger. And it brings about frustration, and it brings about questions of what is fair and what is unfair. And I will share that in many ways I have to agree with my brother Rhymefest, is that if we center America, if we center the oppression that we have experienced, Akanke, you spoke about it again with centering 1619. If we don't look back to a time for our people when we were living whole and complete, and I know April will get to this a little bit later, but when we were living in a healthy way, we can't think that 1619 and that our history starts at the bottom of a slave ship and starts upon our arrival here. And as a result, then we cannot think that the language of justice that we're using to apply to any conversation about healing and reparations has to be through the lens of capitalist mentality and a capitalist ideology. So while there is an understanding of justice and universal truths that speak of fairness and speak of light and speak of integrity and character and honor, while there is that, we can't expect the thief to give back and to understand the wrongs that have been committed, especially when the wrongs are still being committed. And so for those who are the recipients of the injustice, it may be in our best interest to consider not only the financial aspect, not only the compensation, so that we can participate in commerce and participate in and engage in maintaining a level of sustainability for us in the now, but also think beyond just the now and think to the future. And what are we trying to carry over? Societies live and they die. This society is going to come to a close, right? This society is going to come to a close. So who are we, and what do we carry forward into the societies, into the future? And that's why we look back to our ancestors. What have they done? What did they advocate for? What is the systems that they put in place that we can carry forward into the future, and ensure that they continue for the time when this society will come to a close? We know it will happen, right? I'm going to pause there, because I know we got some people with powerful opinions that have something to share.
Thank you. This is what we wanted. Ryan Pest, I'm gonna come back to you because you opened up, right? So I'm gonna come back to you because I know you have some other things that I definitely want you to talk about, but I want to bring on Nana Osei first, okay? So Nana Osei, another, there we go, amazing human being who I've had the honor of meeting and working with, and who's a part of the AKILA family, as well as I am a part of his family. So let me do the technical thing here for those who may not know. Nana Osei Williams is the CEO of the Asase Entertainment Group, LLC. And he has ascended, rightfully so, to a position of tremendous influence on African dance music and culture in Brooklyn, and I dare say beyond. He oversees the day-to-day direction of all of the affiliate programs that range from dance and education, working with young people in the schools and beyond. He oversees that through the nonprofit organization. Nana Osei, how many years has it been now?
This is year 22.
22. I thought I was right if I was to say more than 20. That organization is the Asase Cultural Arts Foundation. Born and raised in Brooklyn. He is the son of two, one American-born, rebellious Mississippi-born Black nationalists, and his mother, who's an African spiritualist. And it is his parents that gave him the context, the understanding, the commitment, the devotion that he has, that is embedded in his bloodstream, his commitment to African culture and the Black community. So that's just a small look into the work that he does with his amazing nonprofit institution. That is a blessing to us all. So Nana Osei, thank you so much for joining us. I know you we can't see him right now, but I know you got a posse behind you. Like, you just represent big and large. So we just thank you for your work.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a prompt for you, and you and I kind of talked about this a little bit offline. I think this was a really good segue, right? My question for you, is financial compensation enough for all of the harm that has been done to Africans in America? Share with us some things that you've shared with me in private, if you would, please.
Since our conversation, I had a lot of thought about what we spoke about. And, we get to slavery and we get to the things that were done, right? But let's take it back a little bit. When you research, right, it says that it was 12.5 million Africans that were brought on the ships. That could be give or take, because who counted did they count every single African that was brought here, right? And then you can't say they counted when they got to America, because we are very aware that people jumped over shit, right? Like they jumped over. So you can't get the real numbers, right? But we got here in some kind of way, they convinced people that we wasn't Africans anymore, right? Some way that was convinced. And now you hear a lot of things about people not being Africans. I'm okay with that, because just like if you go to Ghana and you see the Akan people are not from Ghana, right? So they traveled from somewhere and got there, but when they got to the place that they was at, it now became theirs. That's us now, right? That's us. We are here. This is our land. We built it. We did so much, right? So to say monetarily, we could just get something for reparations, that's insane. Look what happened with the Louisiana Purchase. How much land was purchased through the Louisiana Purchase for France to say, we packing our stuff, we going back over here, right? So it could never just be the money, right? Because as this corporation goes, everything that's dealing with money is going to always be for the corporation. So those are some of the things that we can never really say, this is going to be how we get here. But it's some things that happened very recent in our time, in our lifetime, that I think the world needs to look at. It was a genocide in Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis, right? I think they said something like 800,000 people were murdered in this little time. If we know of any of our areas, Rwanda's not that big. And where this genocide happened is not that big. So if we know of 800,000 people murdered in a little small space, right? They're just killing each other. We could never in our mind think that something would change so fast. Now, if you look at Rwanda, they went to their culture and their tradition and they fixed it. The elders fixed it. Right. And that's some of the problem that we constantly have with some of these issues, is that is really no elders that fix these things here, because it's usually driven over money. Things are driven over power, things are driven over property. All of these different things is what things are driven off of, right? But when you look at Rwanda, they say that Rwanda is one of the safest places in all of Africa right now. That's crazy. What was the genocide in 1994, I believe? From 1994 to 2023, you go from a place of killing 800,000 people. And some of those people dispersed, like some of the people that was doing things, they went to other countries, they had to set up in other places. But now this is the safest place in the world. But we're still going through so many things here in America that keep us backwards. But if we just do a little bit of research, not a lot, just a little bit of research, how many Fortune 500 companies are still reaping the benefits of slavery? How many Fortune 500 companies are putting presidents, senators, Congress, and all of these people into power? They're putting as much money as they can, putting people into power. So how could we even think like the money exchange will happen and that will affect the trauma that has happened? It doesn't equate, right? Because the money exchange will only get people a little bit off of the guard of what happened for all of this time, right? We can't talk about our great-great-grandparents that came here with a name that was changed, or with a culture that was changed, or a tradition, all of these things that we're trying to win back, right? We can't even, we have to think about the 80s of the crack era, right? Was that not as bad as slavery? The pushing the drugs in the communities, the killings of each other, the amount of money that was being given to 16 and 17-year-olds, driving fancy cars with all of the jewelry. And now it's kind of like promoted that that's the cool way to be, right? It's promoted because we're dealing with children every day. So when we're dealing with children, we can't even talk to them unless it's about money, or unless it's about some kind of power, or unless it's about what they will call clout. So I think that the bigger picture is a lot bigger than just the money, right? it's the structure. It is the not just but the infrastructure of families. It's the infrastructure of communities. Do we really know what a community is? You know, I always felt like I knew what a community was, but that was so small that when I went other places, like if I went to Charleston where my mother's family from, or I went to Mississippi, it looked so different. And this is my family. These are close, not far removed family members. And it looks so.
How did it look different? If I can ask for clarity, what do you mean?
In New York, I felt like the community I was in was about empowering ourselves. It was about empowering ourselves traditionally and religiously. It was about empowering ourselves in our community. So I grew up in Bed-Stuy, which is, or I don't know if it is still, but it was the largest Black community, outside of Africa and Brazil. So, I grew up with cultures, growing up, seeing things like International African Arts Festival, Dance Africa. These things that's empowering. And you go down there and the most that you would get is a fish fry or, things like that. So when I went there, I was like, we have to do things a little different. They was like, nah, we don't do it like that down here. Let's keep everything cool, go back to New York with that. And that's what I did. I did it fast. But as a musician, I travel, I get around. I don't travel anymore as a musician, but I did. So you get to see a lot. But you go to these places and you like, oh nah, but we have pockets of resistance. And I'm not trying to separate myself from our brothers and sisters in the South because they made a lot of headway and leeway for us. But I'm just talking about the day-to-day, right? So just based on your question, just the money is could never be enough. They pay $15 million for the Louisiana Purchase, right? That's nothing. But let's one more thing that I just want to say. Of course, we got to deal with America, but it wasn't America that was bringing those people over here. Let's be clear. It was England, it was Spain, it was France, it was Belgium. It was, you understand what I'm saying? So I get it why Malcolm X and a lot of people wanted to go to the UN to talk, because it wasn't just America. America was a bypart of the things that happened. They wanted to come set up over here, and they did set up over here. But it was all of these places, when we read about King Leopold, is crazy. It's insane, the things that would happen. When we read about, these generals that were fighting Asante for years in Ghana, it's insane. So these things, like, we've been separated because we've got here, and it's like, we're here now, and you're not from over there, then it breaks us a lot more than just a financial setup or financial satisfaction.
Yeah, you connected a lot of dots with that one. and I think that's good. Akanke, let me say this before I point you out, and then we're going to bring on Erica. Again, dropping names. For those who are new to this conversation or need a refresher, we talked about some organizations earlier. I think Mo put in the chat, Nkechi Taifa's book. Mo, if you didn't do that already, please do. There are people who have been doing this work. And I felt it important when I was asked to pull this panel together to make sure that, like, this is a conversation that belongs to people of African ancestry first and foremost, right? If we're talking about slavery reparations in the United States, it belongs to us first and foremost. But it's a conversation for anyone, any human being. You can be not from that community. You could not know anything about reparations. You could be new to understanding. There are varying levels of understanding, which is fine, because that's what evolution is, right? As human beings. But I was particularly interested in bringing together artists and activists and independent scholars who are oftentimes either behind the scenes or at the grindstone, doing the work, and they might not be out there in the way that some people are, and because maybe that's not where they want to be. Maybe their gift to this movement and to the movement for justice and fairness and equity in the world is not in the way that we're typically used to seeing it. So I thought it important to bring some different voices to the table. So that's why even though I know everybody here, Erica is my mentee, my teachers on here and so forth, but I wanted to make sure that we understand that this conversation belongs to a number of people. So keep that in mind. If this is a teaching tool for you, that's wonderful. Make sure you learn about Queen Mother Moore. Make sure you learn about John Conyers. Make sure you learn about, there's some videos that we'll put in as a resource as well that have been tremendously informative. So it can drown out the disinformation about this topic. I think that's important. So Erica, I'm gonna come to you in a quick second, but Akanke, you wanted to add something to the conversation?
I do, and to also ask a question to Nana. I thank you for using Rwanda as an example. I was thinking of, I was gonna talk about like what reparations look like for the Jews, because they actually change physical structures in Germany. But I think that Rwanda is an excellent example because, like Nana said, they went back to their culture. But I just really, what that means, right? So after the genocide in Rwanda, they had healing circles. They had the United Nations and all the nonprofits come in to quote unquote help them heal and repair. And they actually had to kick those people out, right? They kicked them out. They had their own healing circles, their own tribunals, where the Hutus and the Tutsis got to confront each other and bring up all that anger that Baba talked about. They didn't sweep it under the rug. They had healing circles. I watched a documentary where the women were saying, the therapists that the white people said, they just wanted them to talk about it over and over again. And they were sad all the time. So they had dancing circles. But I'm saying that to say, when we started this conversation, I said, you have to dismantle those systems. That is what Rwanda did. They dismantled those systems. Right now they're being talked about because they done closed something like 8,000 churches. And they keep giving reasons. Oh, they weren't sanitary, but they're trying to prevent what is going on in other parts of Africa, where you have these evangelicals that are pitting people against each other. So Rwanda, again, changing the systems. We just closing the churches, they done close mosques. They are changing those systems that aided in their oppression anyway. So I think that's a perfect example. So I want to thank you for that. You mentioned the Akan not being from Ghana, and then you made reference to us, so we can be our own ethnic group. I want to know from you, because I get it, the Akan aren't from Ghana, they moved to Ghana, they became their own ethnic group. But there are multiple ethnic groups, right? And particularly with the Ashanti who broke off, I don't know if it was helpful for them to do that in times of war.
So one thing about the Akan people, that the Akan people was started by 7 brothers, right? In Ghana. Akan means first and pure. Actually, April worked on a performance with us some years ago, and we really dug into the research of the Akan people in Ghana and all of these things, and the brilliance of Kwame Nkrumah naming the country Ghana. because it didn't have a name before the British and the Dutch and the German and all of the people that came there to rape it. Before they came there, they just had groups of people. So when the Akan people, when they came down from Ethiopia to Ghana, they said this land, we're the first people in this land, and it's a pure land, right? And one of the things is the Akan people are still together to this day. They have different clans in it. Akan is really for the language. So they have the different clans that speak very similar languages that make them Akan. But the unique thing about them is that all of the traditional Akan areas are all led by chief. Every single one is led by a chief. There is no governmental power that could come into Ghana that could take over a land from a chief. Impossible. It can't happen. The whole country will go into uproar. So that's something that's unique. That is, I'm not sure about the rest of Africa, right? I know the rest of Ghana is not like that, but I'm not sure if the rest of Africa, because I haven't done enough research on, all of the places. But as far as the Akan people, they're close, they're very tight knit, because what they did was, once they all said we're going to be together, right, from the different places that they came together, they said we're not going to take our roots back to a man. We're going to take our roots back to a totem. And that totem cannot be, like, you can't say that this totem is something bigger or smaller. It's just a totem for us, right? So if you hear the stories, you know that the stories are not real. You know that the stories are myths, but you know that the stories were planted there so they could keep their unity. And so all of the fighting that they did over land and stuff like that, it was broken off. So, it's an agreement amongst all of the chiefs of the land of the Akans that, yes, the Asantes are the leaders, the Oyoko clan. That is the royal clan, Oyoko, they're the Asantes, right? The outsiders call them Asantes, but the insiders, the people that are there, they say the Oyoko people. So we know that these people, they figured out a way to say that we're going to keep our land. They fought for their golden stool for hundreds of years. The British kept trying to take it, right? And that was the thing that they said kept them together, right? But this is something that, again, is another example of a few hundred years ago, how the people got together with their tradition and really said, this is how we're going to move this ahead, and we're going to be able to keep what we have, and we're getting everything else out. Now, of course, because I go to Ghana, you see certain hypocrisies, but that's just my opinion. It's working for them.
That's a lot of history right there. Thank you. Thank you for that. Rhymefest, I didn't forget about you, because you have some stories to tell too that we talked about in the green room so keep that at the forefront. But I want to, before we do that, I want to bring on Erica, my dear sister, my fellow Howard grad. We on the battleground still at our beloved alma mater. So for those of you who might not know this wonderful young woman activist who I met just 2 years ago, let me just do a quick read of her short bio. Erica England is a strategic partnerships coordinator at Unemployed Workers United. She's from Raleigh, North Carolina, and from a West African immigrant background. Specifically, one of her parents is from Sierra Leone. That's a unique perspective that I was excited that could come to this table. Erica began her political journey, as I said, as a student activist at Howard University. She then joined the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign in 2019 as an operations manager in the national office. Yes, and she's also worked with Senator Nina Turner. So again, super short bio for an amazing, committed, devoted activist who I've come to adore. So Erica, welcome. I would like to ask you, you've heard a lot, right? You get to weigh in, but I'm particularly interested in your work as a boots on the ground labor activists, right? Like that's a perspective that is unique from anybody here. And I'd like you to kind of weigh in on what you've heard. This notion from your perspective, is financial compensation enough? Like, what are your thoughts on that, please?
Well, first, thank you for having me on. This conversation has been very eye-opening, and I've learned a lot. And this is a topic that I feel like I'm continuing to learn about, something that I feel like I haven't really heard much about up until recent years. But when I think about reparations and if financial compensation is enough, I pull from just my background, for one. As you mentioned, as a recent college graduate, but also as a community advocate, and specifically in labor, activist and organizer as well. I think when I hear that question, there's a phrase that comes to mind, and it's that it costs to be poor. It costs to be poor. When you put a labor perspective on reparations, I think about communities of Black people that were burned to the ground or covered in water, that had thriving businesses, places to teach their children, families. And when we talk about all that's owed to Black people in this country, a check is simply not going to do. We have to dismantle systems that keep us in those positions. And I think specifically, there's a couple of examples and instances that come to mind, apart from just writing a check, because a check is definitely owed. There was no 40 acres and a mule. We were kept out of a lot of things that would have generated generational wealth for us. I think of like the GI Bill, that Black people were not able to take advantage of. I think of like Social Security, people that are left out of when Social Security was first implemented, folks that were left out of it, like farm workers and domestic workers. Those groups of people specifically being made up of Black people. I think at one point they said it was like 60% during that time period, when Social Security became a thing. Because we were left out of those systems historically, we have to dismantle and just reconfigure how we go about catching up with the racial wealth gap in this country. Catching up, and reparations is the way to do that. But it looks different. There's different ways that we have to do that, because it has to address, there are different sectors that it has to address. When I think about reparations, I think about disparities in education. I think about disparities in housing. I think about disparities in labor. There's a saying, I think in the Black community, I've heard often, last one's hired, first one's fired. When COVID hit, especially, we saw how badly it hit Black people. I remember hearing about Black farm workers who were trying to push to get extra protections in place because of COVID. And of course, there's folks that just don't want to see Black people receive anything. So they were cut out of that and were hit a lot harder than their white counterparts who also did the same work. I also just think about previous generations, groups of people that did receive some form of reparations. Not to say that they got all that they were due, but there was something. We're the only group that haven't received anything. And there is an atonement that needs to be made. I think about groups of Native Americans, Japanese Americans during World War II. I think someone earlier mentioned about the Jewish people. I think there was something like about a Marshall Plan that helped them receive reparations during the Holocaust. And there hasn't been anything comparable for Black people in this country. And when I talked about being just a recent graduate as well, and being a Black student, specifically like a Black student that goes to a Black school, I think about like a recent case with the HBCUs in Maryland, who won I think it was $577 million lawsuit against the state of Maryland. And their case was that they had been historically underfunded since their inception. And they won that case and were able to prove, yes, we have been historically underfunded. And to me, that is a form of reparations as well. Like you see these schools have been systemically underfunded, make up for that. And that's HBCUs across the country.
Yeah, you tied in a lot with that one, bringing in the different arenas and brought it back to that academic institution, which we need. I'm glad that you touched on the other groups in this country who have received reparations and pointed out how outstanding it is that we still here are trying to get people to even understand what that could mean for us, because I think the topic for some people is the butt of a lot of jokes, oftentimes, you know what I mean? But again, harkening back to the title, Reparations Above and Beyond, this is hopefully a teaching tool so we can get deep on the topic. So we're not done. We have some time. We're still going to do Q&A for those who might have come in late. But Rhymefest, I want to circle back to you, and then Chief Ayanda, I do have a question for you as well. But Rhymefest, share with the audience, please, what you were telling us about your experiences, because you've traveled. Everybody here, which I love, has put their feet at least once or 17 times, on the continent. Can you talk about your work and the story that you told us earlier, please, Ngrimo?
Of course. Yeah, and we have a school that we have developed in Tanzania called Golgotha. We're developing arts curriculum and programs in Dakar, Senegal, and we're also working in the sub-Saharan African country of Mauritania. But before I go into that, I kind of want to come back to what Brother Nana and Sister Erica were talking about. When we talk about Jewish reparations, when we talk about Japanese reparations, when we talk about Rwanda, we're talking about people who have their own country. And let's get it right. They got reparations because their countries have strategic positions with American military bases on those positions, and reparations was a small thing to pay to the limited amount of people who were affected in America and those Jewish and Japanese groups, compared to us who have no country other than America. So when we say we want reparations, that's different, because that's a full-on, when we talk about dismantling systems, you're talking about war. I know it sounds subversive and it sounds good, but you're talking about war, and the people you're saying it to know you're talking about war. So that's the resistance you're going to get, is a warlike position when you start talking about dismantling systems as the only way. Now, if we don't have a country, what I'm looking at, as we move this conversation forward, Brother Nana was talking about currency, and a check is not enough. Money is not enough. Listen, what kind of NDA are we going to sign for reparations? You ain't going to be able to say nothing about no kind of injustice ever after you get that $500 check. Now, however, if we're talking about currency, how can we use something bigger than money? Something, when we were brought here, we were the gold. We were the black gold that was brought to build this country. I believe we have cultural currency, and that is a real thing. When we look at what Lin-Manuel has been able to do with Hamilton, and then being able to help Puerto Rico, the money he's been able to raise in Puerto Rico through his cultural currency. If we look at LeBron James during COVID, he was able to shut down all the arenas and say, we're going to put voting booths in these stadiums. And who else would have been able to do that? That was a real thing. When Puff Daddy says, vote or die. And he's able to do a whole campaign to get all the people together to vote Bill Clinton in office. That is value and that is currency. I believe sometimes we're waiting for the whole of Black diaspora to get on board before we move forward. There are only going to be a few people who understand anyway, not in the colorism version of W.E.B. Du Bois' Talented 10th, but there will be an information version of the Talented 10th that need to move the conversation forward for the masses of people. And you will need the cultural currency that we bring to bear to leverage for justice. And so because we don't have a country to leverage those reparations or that justice that we're talking about, I guess my concept is, how do we use cultural currency as leverage for justice?
How do we?
Well, that's something that, you know, people, first of all, most of us don't even know the cultural currency we possess. We don't even look at it like a real thing, because you look at your gift like, if my gift didn't perform well in the marketplace, then it's not a gift. I'll throw it away. You know how many musicians I know that have community influence, but because they can't get on the top whatever, they'll stop rapping, they'll stop singing, they'll stop organizing in the community because it didn't sell records. And so that's what I mean by dismantling the capitalistic mind state of currency and starting to define our gifts as currency. And then I guess I would ask the question, how much have you invested in the culture to even take a loan out of the culture to leverage it for something else? So, you know, I'll give you a perfect example. I'm good friends with a woman named Robin Ruth Simmons, who actually got reparations passed in her small town of Evanston, Illinois. What happened was that over the last 70, 80 years, there was redlining where a lot of Black people through Northwestern University were moved out of their really nice homes by the beach. What Robin Ruth Simmons did was say, let's use weed, the money from the weed dispensaries, the tax money, to pay reparations to these people who are poor in Evanston that used to own homes. Let's also give them discounts on, big discounts on nice homes in this town. Robin Ruth Simmons was able to get reparations passed, you know, and she used, what she used as currency was the benefit that it brings to the whole town of Evanston for there not to be poor Black people or, you know, impoverished Black people. It was just overall better for the town. And she was able to make a case and actually get that passed. I think we have to look at, what is it that we have to leverage? Some people haven't built enough to leverage. Some people are so institutionalized that they can't leverage anything because they're already owned. So how many of us are independent enough, have enough influence, and to finish the story about Robin. Robin just did a fellowship with David Axelrod at the University of Chicago. She called me in to be on her panel, and now the University of Chicago is asking me to do a fellowship at the David Axelrod University of Chicago program. Then I get to choose someone. So now how do we keep building this leverage and this cultural power with the institutions for what it is we say we want as reparations? We're gonna have to start dealing with them now, but what are we willing to give? I know there was something taken and we don't wanna give nothing. However, for the justice that we're asking for, you're gonna have to have something. You can't come empty-handed.
I'm glad you put that in there. I heard about her, but just a little bit, so you expanded it. So thank you. Thank you. But I
Can I say one thing?
Well,
I just want to say one thing.
Okay.
It's going to be really, really quick. What you said, I agree with you. I wasn't taken from Rwanda. I was just using that as an example for us, that, you know, they took something from their culture to make it better for them. So what you're saying is what I agree with. I didn't mention the Jews, the Japanese, or anybody.
And Rwanda is also their country, which
Yeah.
is a different situation for us You know what I mean? A lot of
No, but
blacks
I'm talking
don't
about
even
just
view
the
America
people.
as our country.
I'm talking about the people though, like as
Yeah.
Black Americans, us coming together to do something for us.
Yeah.
It has always been how my wheels turn. Just like you said, how somebody passed it to you and then you pass it to somebody. That's a cultural concept that we can have control over, and we can control the narrative as we're on this forum right now. So that was just that. I just wanted to interject that to just say that, I agree with everything that you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Just like how you broke it down. I agree with it. Yeah, I wasn't against that at all. And I'm not thinking, like I said, I'm not thinking about us dealing with, like, we don't have our own country, but we do because we're here. That's why I talked about the migration of the Akan,
Good point. Good
And we
point.
talking about war. When we talking about disassembling systems, what they hear is war. And
We're
that's
clear.
what we're saying. And we need to be clear that what we're talking about is that.
Yeah.
I think you're talking to people that understand the power of words in that way. You know what I mean? I think you're a master wordsmith for sure, and we get it. But Ryan, please tell us that story. I thought it was so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, floor is yours.
So basically, I do abolitionist work. I've been working in a country called Mauritania for the last 10 years. In 2017, when I visited Mauritania, this is the last place where they do race-based slavery. The white Moors enslaved the Black Africans, and you can usually tell who's the slave class by skin color in Mauritania. These Moors have come from Algeria, Morocco, into what was the Ghanaian Empire, and they pushed the Ghanaian Empire back. Now, who the Moors also brought with them was an enslaved class called the Haratine. And the Haratine is, when you see those pictures of the Black Moors strong with the garb on, those were enslaved people. What the white Arab Moor did was say, we're so powerful, our slaves are powerful. You can't get through our slaves who have their own armies. And so the Haratine today is in the Saharan desert of Africa, and very few people mention them. Well, when I went there, one of the guys who takes care of us, he was the first freed out of bondage of his family, and he and his brother went back and bought his mom's freedom, the rest of his family's freedom. He said, one day I'm going to make it to America, and when I make it to America, I'm going to help build my freed village, because once you're free in Mauritania, that is the beginning of your biggest problem. There's no system, no documentation, no nothing, no help, no hospitals, no nothing. And so I told Hassan, I said, you walk one step at a time. You can walk from here to America. Well, recently, Hassan walked from Mauritania through Senegal, through the Gambia, caught an airplane to France, sold everything he had from France to Panama, walked from Panama, Ecuador, Honduras, Guatemala, spent 5 days in the Mexican jail, jumped in the water in Tijuana, ice, razor cold water, went through the Gorin Strait in the forest, swam to San Diego, made it to my house in Chicago last Thursday and said, brother, where's the masjid? I need to pray, break my fast, and finish my mission. So that puts another, since Hassan has been with our family, he's improved the quality of my life through improving the quality of my perspective about this whole conversation. These Africans have been enslaved since 500 years before we went through what we went through. And that man just went through hell, came here, looks at everything in America and says, wow, how much do you pay for dinner? I said, oh, it's not that much. He said, well, you eat out too much. I'll cook every night. Send that to my village. How much you pay for that car wash? Don't do that. Send that to my village. I'll wash your car. There are ways that we can work with one another to build villages all around the world. And I think that we're limiting our discussion when we're talking about governmental small checks. We should be asking for more. But in order to do that, We have to have a diasporic approach with, if we're talking about, it was more than America, it was the Britons, it was the Brits, it was the Dutch, it was the Portuguese. That means we need to get to all those other tribes who they affected and do a massive global class action. Give it to us.
Well, you done said a whole word. That's powerful. That's
Because
enlightening.
if we just do America, I just think it's so small. It's spinning our wheels in oil.
Yeah, I would agree. We got to stay broad for sure. Our livelihood depends on that, and I think it's a both and. You know, like we say, it's not an either or; it's a both and. So the first thing we got to know, let people know that it's okay to think beyond these shores, and that's a whole lifetime journey for many of us. We're open to it, but for some people that's a lifelong journey, but it's worth it. My mother always says, ask the question, is it worth it? So we got to make that decision. Thank you, Rhymefest. Thank you for that. Chief Ayanda, I want you, if you would, please, sir. We've talked about land, we've talked about material, we've talked about matter, we've talked about a number of things, we've talked about isms. It's been an intellectual, historical, educational thing, but we started off beyond that. Can you, from your perspective, can you share with us, all things considered, what does it mean to be whole in the first place? What if we know that the base of what we're talking about is repair or healing or the restoration of balance? Can you, from your perspective, talk about what that means in the first place? And is it even possible, be it for an individual or a community? You understand what I'm asking?
I do. And in order to address that, thank you for asking that question, because in order to address that, we have to consider all the perspectives that have been offered, which are all so first of all, I've been able to sit back and listen to everything that everyone's saying because I'm a student, right? I'm a student. There are a lot of people who have been fighting this battle and who have been advocating and defending and propelling this conversation. And I'm first of all, to always give praise to those who have paved the way for us to have this conversation. And then when I'm listening to everything that's being offered here, it makes me think of when we're talking about dismantling systems, when we're talking about warfare, when we're talking about capitalist mentality, when we're talking about trauma. Let's look at what was intended, right? What was intended with the kidnapping and the enslavement of our ancestors. What was intended, it was to create a system that would not only benefit the individuals in that time, but that would benefit those generations after. And so the trauma that was employed and the approaches that were taken strategically were not only to create a system in the then now that would be effective, but in the perpetual future. And that means then that we disrupt and we dismantle systems that allow people to be whole and healthy, right? And so in order to create a slave, you have to extract them from their culture, from their history, from their heritage, from their power. You have to disrupt them from being able to make decisions for themselves that are beyond survival and that are about thriving and are about community. And so we have to break down the ties that bind us. We have to break down the ideologies that protect us. We have to break down the philosophies that guide us. We have to break down the language that allows us to communicate. We have to break down all of those systems and inject another programming. And that programming includes the disruption of the self, the disruption of the power, the disruption of the community, this disruption of families, the ability to look beyond myself and see the humanity in my sister, in my brother, in my family member, and to connect with them. It's necessary to disrupt those things, to break down the very things that make us human beings, the very things that allow us to exist as human beings. So as Ronfest so accurately said, dismantling systems is fighting, we're talking war, but we have to fight the war everywhere that the enemy lies. And that sometimes means we have to fight the war within our mind, within our thinking, within our programming. And we have to dismantle that. That means we might have to go to war with ourselves in our own way of thinking, our own way of processing, our own way of understanding who we are, because it was purposely put in place, the inhumanity of we African peoples, of we descendants of people who survived the atrocity of slavery. Even in our language, how are we using, I'm not gonna say slave, right? I'm gonna say enslaved African. And as everyone on this panel understands, we're talking about people. I'm inspired by Brother Hassan. I'm inspired by his ability to understand the value of freedom and connect to family. So when we're talking about all the other communities that receive reparations, yeah, they had a country, but what they had first and foremost was an identity, as an understanding of self, understanding of who they are. So to answer your question, April, what does it mean to be whole? What does it mean to be healthy? It means that we understand we have a culture, we have morals, values, aesthetics, we have systems in place that govern the way we choose to make decisions. What is valuable to us? What is important to us? What is significant to us? So it's real when Brother Hassan's like, don't you eat out too much. Oh, wait a second, you know what? Let me change that. I might have been programmed to think that meal that I can order on Grubhub or on Uber Eats is more valuable than the small pennies that I could give to my family away from, that benefits them and not necessarily me, right? Washing my car. Yeah, I like to have I like to have my car clean, but wait a second, what is the cost? What is the cost? And as Sister Erica said, it costs to be poor. Poverty costs, right? Poverty costs. Why does poverty cost? Poverty costs because of the mindset. So if we can allow ourselves to see ourselves as rich, as wealthy, as powerful, first and foremost, in our minds, then we have the ability to allow that to work into all of our actions. So my work is about healing the self, right? Healing the self. Healing individuals, one of doing the self-work that we individually can do, because in order for us to have a movement, it has to first begin with the individual. And in order for it to begin with the individual is not outside of me, the individual is inside of me. And so I have to start with me. What am I doing that's making myself? How can I heal myself? How can I be whole? How can I be healthy? How can I make sure mind, body, and spirit is functioning properly and appropriately? Right? That is important and necessary because the disruption of programming was such to disrupt mind, disrupt body, disrupt spirit, right? Let's disrupt those things. Let's create systems that allow for the continuous disruption of mind, body, and spirit within a culture, within a people, such they will continue to be enslaved to a degree, right? So this conversation that we're having about financial wellness and about a check, that's important. It's important to think about the financial resources that we have in order to make change. It's important to consider how we are going to participate in commerce on a global scale. It's important to do those things. It is equally important to make sure that when those checks come in, we know what to do with them. I know a lot of people that when they get a check, they don't use it wisely, right? So it's not just about the check. What we can throw money. I love what Brother Rhymes has said, that we got to sign an NDA, because once that check comes, you can't complain anymore because you got your check, right? So now that's the end of the conversation. We look at lawsuits. This country is there's always a lawsuit. There's always a lawsuit. Let's go and let's sue. I'm gonna sue you. And whatever the financial compensation is given to a thing, what immediately comes from that is that now restitution has been made. Now amends have been made. So now we're back to neutral. No friend. I don't want to check if I'm gonna have to stop saying that injustice has been done. I don't want to check if we're gonna have to stop advocating for the whole health and wellness of the individual and our community. So April, is it possible? It is possible. It is possible. How do we go about that? We go about dismantling those systems of oppression. We dismantle the mental slavery. None but ourselves can heal our minds, right? So I'm quoting our amazing sage Bob Marley in that respect. So we have to, while we do the work, Akanke, while we do the work of education, while we do the work as artists, while we do the work, Erica, as in labor, in making sure that there's equity and fairness in our labor practices, while Nana Osei, while we're doing the work with and considering the global responsibility and the global implications of what reparations means, not just for Fortune 500 American companies, but Fortune 500 global companies. And we can look to what our brothers and sisters and family in Rwanda did. We can look to establishing, I love what you said about, Nana Osei, about chiefs, that there's leadership, right? There's leadership, and whether they're called chiefs, whether they're called mayors, whether they're called whatever they're called, there's someone who is advocating for the community at large. So,
but Baba, can I ask you this? I'm sorry. I thought you were.
No, I'm listening.
So I there's a voice in my head that I think we can all relate to, right? Give us some wisdom, drop some pearls, please, for those people who the idea that we gotta deal with self and be all self-reflective and find balance in our lives and deal with our individual whatever. There's a mindset that says I don't want to hear none of that. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fight. There's rage. How would one deal with those who don't have patience for this long-term marathon perspective that you and others and I are thinking about? Because that transformation of the mind and breaking of the shackles is lifelong. And there are some people who don't believe or actually don't have the patience for that kind of internal transformation. Like, what would one say from your perspective as a healer? How do you, there's rage here and there's hurt that doesn't have time or patience for any of the stuff that we're talking about. Not the history, not the self-reflection, not the transformation of the mind, none of that. What would one say from your perspective on
one would say that if we don't do that, nothing else is going to work. If we don't, now that doesn't mean that we don't take actionable steps every single day. Okay. It doesn't mean, patience is not equated with inactivity, right? Patience doesn't mean that we're not advocating, we're not taking steps, we're not doing real things. I'm reminded of the way a body works, right? The way the body works. The body has, we all know that we have the heart, we have the internal organs, we have the mind, we have the brain, we have the arms and the legs, we have all of the parts of the body that in order for the body to function appropriately, all of those body parts have to work together. They all have to do their job. They all have to fulfill their purpose. I teach and I use a and Odu-Ifa. Akanke, you shared that as Ifa practitioners, we hearken and we draw on the wisdom of our sacred texts, right? Amongst the Yoruba, one of the sacred texts is Odu-Ifa. And so the Odu-Ifa as sacred text is understood to be imbued with the wisdom of the universe, the wisdom that guides and propels the societies forward. And one Odu-Ifa that I'm speaking to is called Odimeji. And Odimeji speaks of the formation of the body and how the body functions properly. And in order for the body to function properly, all aspects of the body have to be called into existence and have to be given their space to fulfill their mission. But what's formed first in utero is the head. The head is formed first, right? We always say the understanding of so a person thinketh, so they do, right? The mind is the one that leads the action. The mind is the one that drives and makes the choices and decisions that will allow begin the process of doing and taking a step. So the head is formed first. And then the head calls all the other aspects that are needed. The head calls the eyes, the head calls the ears and the nose and the mouth and the hands and the feet and the arms and the legs, all parts of the body that have a responsibility. But without the head, without the thought, without the intent, without the balance that comes from clear thinking and balanced thinking, all other actions are willy-nilly, are devoid of consistent logic and consistency that allows for an action to be taken. So without the individual healing, without the balance that comes of sound thought and mind, without the understanding of who we are and how we connect to the world around us, without that understanding, sans programming, sans intentional injection of trauma and disruption and programming that is inconsistent with our human balance, with that mind, that thinking will allow us to take those steps. It's not a quick fix. It took us a long time to get here. Mm-hmm. It took us Akanke, those slave dungeons were built well before 1619. Right? It took us a long time to get to the space that we're in right now. And that doesn't mean that we have to wait another 400 years, right? Mm-hmm. for balance. It doesn't mean that, but it means that the unraveling of this situation we're in is a number of small steps. Hassan took a number of small steps every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. He took a number of steps. If he stopped and said, this is too much, I don't have patience to get to America, you take the steps each and every day. And ultimately, you're going to get to Ronfest's door. And you're going to get to a space where it's like, I'm going to wash that car and send that money back home, right? But it takes time, and it takes, again, I'm not advocating for a lack of movement. I'm saying, let's understand that we're in this for a long haul, right? Mm-hmm. We're not talking about the benefit of, I'm not even talking about the benefit of just my children. I'm talking about my children's 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 children. That's what I'm speaking for. That's the battle that I'm facing. And that means then, what am I going to carry? What am I going to put forward and give to my children for them to carry forward into the next generations? That's what was given to us. That's what was given to us, and that's what we're gonna promote.
Absolutely.
I've been sitting on those thoughts for a minute.
I know. But wait, I think I got a message that Rhymefest, you have to leave. Yeah.
I do. Look, I let Hassan go to the grocery store and he got lost, so I got to go get him.
Yeah.
He's lost.
So that
isn't that a microcosm? Because right, we are our brother's keeper, right? So
I gotta go get them.
We gotta set them up. We gotta make sure they know what to do with that.
You know, I do want to say real quick to your point, Chief Ayanda. You know, one of the things he said to how do we do it for the masses? Hassan always says the journey that I just took is not for the weak. And a lot of people in Mauritania are asking me about the route that I took to get here, because what you'll never see in America is a Black Mauritanian. They're called Haritines. They underneath the, you know. And so he said, I will not tell the people in my country the route because their minds are still weak, slaves. He said, and I'll kill them if I tell them the route to here. My mind was different. And so, you know, I think that doesn't change just because we're figuratively 500 years in the future compared to him. What we're talking about in terms of reparations is not for the weak. And I think sometimes we try to wrap ourselves around how do we carry the weak into the future. I'm out of that part. I'm done with that. I live on the south side of Chicago. I'm done carrying the weak. The future is not for that.
Wow.
We cannot be the descendants. We cannot be the descendants of the weak. We are the descendants of those who were successful, because those are the ones who were able to beget children, right? And so we are the descendants of the victors.
But I think that's probably where we differ. I want reparations globally. So I have a house in Ghana. I have this conversation with Ghanaians all the time. I don't want them to have to leave their country for a decent standard of living. I want global reparations for the weak so that they can be fine, so that they can be healthy, so that they can be whole where they are. I am absolutely impressed by his journey, but I'm constantly having conversations with Ghana because America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, it's paved with gold. It was done by plunder. So we compare Ghana, who doesn't have the infrastructure, the roads and everything. They're always comparing it to the US, not understanding that Ghana didn't have all the years of enslavement to build those roads. They didn't have all the years of enslavement to build the empire. I do not want the children that I care for in West Africa to feel that they have to escape their country to come here, to be whole, to be happy, to have a decent meal, to have to just have the basic standards of life, right? So I do want reparations for the weak. I want reparations for the people who can't make that journey. I want reparations for the people who don't have access to healthcare and all the damn books that I had to read to understand systems of oppression. I want reparations for those people. And so that's first and foremost. Second, I think it's multiple conversations going on. Baba Ayanda, I agree 100% that there is a mental, emotional, and psychological journey we have to do as individuals just to be whole, healthy on the planet. But we don't do those things absence of community and system, right? So even though those things have to happen, they are easier within systems that nurture those things, right? I do not know a group of people who have overcome oppressive systems by just collectively working together to be happy and whole without addressing the systems of oppression that have disrupted their ability to be happy and whole to begin with, right? So it's no doubt in my mind, I agree with you 100%. Like I go to therapy, damn it. I take my, spiritual baths. I get my divinations. I pour libations I do all the things. And yet there is a physical reality that African people globally are going to have to contend with. I appreciate that Rhyme Fest amplified the sister in Evanston, Illinois, who used her social political capital so that people could receive checks for housing discrimination. But if we don't understand that they can still take that money and use it to buy a house, and solely because they are Black, that house can be devalued, we're not dealing with the whole system.
We are in 100%. I'm sorry, Erica. I want to share, Akanke, we are in 100% agreement. There's no question. This is an and conversation, right? So we need to do these things simultaneously. And so just like that circular argument of how do you have a community without an individual? A community is a collection of individuals. If we're not focusing on the individuals, then how can we focus on the community? If we don't focus on the community, then how can we support the individual? It's a cyclical argument. And that means these things have to happen simultaneously. That means the ones, as we know better, we do better. And as we get a little bit, we apply. And so yes, we do have to have reparations. The reparations conversation that we're having is, what do reparations look like? What does it mean to have reparations? Reparations is not just the financial, it's all of the aspects, right? It's all I spend time in Nigeria all the time, right? And we take care of, and we do not intend for people to have to leave their homes, their families, their cultures to come to America in order to achieve some level of financial wellness, some level of sustainability for themselves and their families. We are in agreement, which is why I think it telling that Hassan is saying, I'm not going to abandon my family back home. I'm going to send them resources, right? Yeah. We all on this call, we are all sending resources back to family members and to communities in this country and outside of this country, and using the resources that we have to help Black people globally, right? And so we're not going to abandon, but we're going to end and contribute while we're doing the self-work.
Absolutely. Exactly. But this is the part that I don't like of my my interrupting. But Eric, I think you wanted to weigh in, so I definitely want your voice to be strong and inserted here as well. What were your thoughts, Erica?
I was going to speak to what Akanke said. Actually, I do think it is an and conversation. Reparations does go broader than just the United States. There's a global impact. And it's reminding me when we're talking about like community and the individual, it's reminding me of when I was last home last year in Sierra Leone. I had a conversation with my cousin who was telling me about how like my father and my uncle who came to the United States put her through school. And she was speaking in reference to my other cousin who I send money to for school myself whenever I get paid. And that cousin wants to come here and study and work and build to be able to send resources back home as well. But my cousin who my father put through school said, I'm not interested in coming to the United States. I see the issues that you have in the United States. You all pretty much can't even get your own mess together. She was speaking in reference to the protests that happened after George Floyd was murdered. And she's like, I'm not interested in that. I feel as though I'd be safer here. And because of your father and your uncle making sure that I was safe and giving me the resources to get educated, she said, I have been able to purchase a home here. I have a good paying job here. I am able to take care of my family here and provide for my family here, and also support our family here. Even though you all still send resources, I'm not one of the people that you have to send resources to. I'm here on the ground, making sure that there is structure and foundation here. And whatever you send is adding to that, because our family is big. And not even just our family unit, but like the community as well. I'm also helping my dad and his alumni group rebuild their school. And that is something, when we talk about reparations, education is so closely tied to that. And we see like how education can pull a whole generation out of poverty just by, and not even just formal education, it's not even just formal education, but education, period, outside of school and inside of school can pull a generation out of poverty, can pull a person out of poverty. So I think it is an and conversation. I think when you talk about on a broader context and just think about how there have been countries that have just like essentially like raped the world of their resources, of their people, of their ways of life. It's very difficult sometimes to contextualize that on a broad scale. You just focus on what you see in front of you. And I think we need to connect those two. That it's not just here. It is a broader issue. I think it's hard for folks to move past that and contextualize that outside of what they physically see as systems that are in their direct path.
I agree too. I hear the through line in all of what we're saying, honestly. You know what I mean? There's a lot of connectivity. And on that note, we've been talking a lot and we got a lot of questions. So I'm gonna ask our host to help me moderate the other part of this, if that's okay with everybody, because we're close to 8:30. I know we have children and family and other things to do. So we're gonna go to the Q&A part. Nana Osei, just because you've been quiet and I'm trying to balance, the conversation, I'm gonna check in the Q&A part and see what the first one is. I haven't seen any of the questions. So Mo, I'm gonna ask you to come on camera. Some of these are links. Okay, some of these are links, not necessarily questions. So I'm going to, great idea. Oh, some of them are comments and not questions per se. Okay, so
Well, while you're looking through, 'cause I wanted to interject, but I was
please.
enjoying listening to the conversation and, just understanding other thoughts, because a lot of times the only thought that we really have is the thought that's in our head. But, as we get around other scholars, as we get around other, people that just have knowledge, we get to understand things on a bigger picture. One of my biggest fights is that it came from just multiple ways. So we talked about the week, we talked about involving everybody, but I always felt like once people got to a certain status, reparations didn't matter to them. Like once certain Black people get to a certain status, it's like, I have to leave my community, right? I have to put my children in different schools where a lot of times they suffer.
Yeah.
And I'm good, so I don't need reparations. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because I'm gonna just talk about myself, right? And of course, I'm not a narcissist, but I just want to put myself in that kind of bracket. When me and my wife thought about what was the optimal neighborhood to live in, it's the neighborhood that we serve, right? It's the neighborhood we serve. It's not the best neighborhood, even though the prices on houses are insane right now, right? But it's the neighborhood that we serve, right? So you see what goes on. You have the haves and the have-nots that people talk about all of the time, right? But the people that have is like, I'm not really a part of this community or this conversation. And what do we really do with that? It's not everybody, of course, but it's a lot of people that's like, I'm not in this conversation. I'm educated. Maybe I wasn't born in America. Maybe, I have whatever money brings them value. And that is something that I think that needs to be really addressed as well. Like, I agree with the and, because it needs to be addressed, because we have a passion for what has been done to us. Anybody that's in any kind of service kind of field, you see what happens to our people. It's a big difference when Asase y'all can say, April, can you please do some PR work for us? And you see somebody that just started their business 2 weeks ago and they got funded from all of these different corporations that are giving them tons of money. And they're like, April, just take all of this money and do whatever you want to do with it, right? you see the difference. But a lot of people, the point I'm making is that a lot of people don't have that kind of real understanding, because the work on the ground with these kids, with these children that are being raised to think that we will never have anything, or you could never get much, so you have to settle for this, is insane. Is insane. So with this case, yes, it's a lot of ands, but I think that the more we have these conversations, these ands just start to come together, and it's like, this is what it is. It's not an and, this is what it is. This is the blueprint for it, and this is how we move forward globally. Because, you know, a few years ago, I had a talk with you, you know, I was like, yeah, I went to Ghana 20-something times, but that doesn't mean nothing if you're not making a difference, right? If you're going there and you're then becoming the oppressor, that doesn't, you know, because a lot of people do that too. They go and they say, this is not America. Why you don't do things like this? But hold on, you're going somewhere else. Brooklyn is not like New Orleans. New Orleans is not like Oakland. Oh, you know what I mean? And we don't expect it to be. We don't expect any parts of it, from the way people dress, the way people rap, the way people eat. We don't expect it to be. But we go to Africa, we become the oppressor. And we become, I'm better than you. We become, so yes, it's a lot of ands, but we need to be able to shrink that in and make it into something that is really workable, conceivable, and for us.
Thank you,
I-
Donna.
Yes, thumbs, yes, I agree. I agree. You got the thumbs up.
Thank you.
Okay, we cannot
Thank
become
you.
the ugly Americans when we leave, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And Ghana there's a lot of them.
A lot of what?
Ugly Americans,
Oh,
and
yeah.
cheap labor, you know, that it's a lot of us who travel with that.
Wow.
Yeah. I think just to add on, I looked at the Q&As, and those are a lot of links. I will say before we come to a close very shortly that all that we covered was scratching the surface. So we're going to do our part, because most of us at our heart and in our DNA, we're educators. So we're going to share some resources. Everybody who's here, we have your email addresses. We have email addresses beyond this list, and we'll share some resources. So panelists, I'm going to come back to you as follow-up and ask you to share your references, like a toolkit. I'm just doing this organically. Your website links and things that will help to edify this conversation in a way that can live on in addition to the video. So just know that I'll come back and we'll share that. So that's for all of us, even though Rhymefest had to go. I know he has some resources he can share, so I'm definitely going to do that. But I think before we close, but there's one question, Mo, that you're privy to that I just missed, that came from what the presenter had asked a question. Marieke, what is that question?
So Marieke Gaoubry, one of our presenters, producers, asked, the question that I have, when I hear that those who enslaved and stole will not offer reparations, what does that mean? But does mean that those who benefit from the legacy of slavery should not be made to pay them?
I think I understand the question.
Those who have enslaved and stole, she heard us saying that those who stole and enslaved shouldn't, and have benefit from slavery, should not be made to pay them back. Because I guess one of our panelists was saying that, I think Rhymefest was saying, don't nobody owe you nothing.
Yeah.
So.
Akanke, you wanna take that? Thank you, Mo.
I mean, I definitely think they should have to pay us back, right? I definitely think they should. There should be, they should have to pay back. There should be financial compensation. My only addendum to that is there were systems that there were, are, and continue to be systems that exist that keep people poor and oppressed. So I want them to pay us back. And you can't have the repair without addressing the system. That's it. You can't have, and Nana gave the example of Rwanda. They address those systems, right? When we talk about, like, everybody here knows, you cannot be anti-Semitic without consequence, right? Mm-hmm. You can't do it no more. It's not just that they got Israel. You cannot openly be anti-Semitic without consequence. So we need systems. You can't be openly white supremacist and capitalist and you know, just go on as business as usual because you gave us a check.
And it, by extension, doesn't that mean that because you gave us a check does not mean that you weren't wrong? And isn't that a part of something foundational here? Okay, if financial compensation is a part of this package or whatever we might want to identify it as, it doesn't mean that if one accepts that check, it doesn't mean that, or it doesn't mean that you're absolved. Like, is there not a way of looking at this that says, okay, this is what we have come to, this is the agreement, this is the contract. It includes the financial, includes this, that, and the other, it includes culture, you know, different kinds of currency.
Can I say something?
And I still get to say that what you did was wrong, it was inhumane, and that this doesn't cover everything. Like, could that not be a part? I would imagine.
Well, most of the organizations that I have seen that organize around reparations, number one is an acknowledgement of the wrongdoing.
For sure. Right. Yeah.
So yes, you have to acknowledge that you are wrong. And it also includes, and when I talk about systems, it's money, but they also include the need for, like, institutions that can teach about the wrongdoing, right?
Yes.
So that people are restored, their history is restored, their culture is restored, so that people understand the full weight of the loss.
And I think in COBRA, even their principles stand on five areas. Not Osei, I'm sorry, you wanted to weigh in.
No problem. Yeah, I really wanted to, because this is something that has always been on my mind and my heart, right? So the systems are so important because you could give everybody money except for the felons, because you could say these felons cannot receive this money from here, right? They can't see this government money. Or you could say he owes all of this money in child support, and when we get this money, we're just going to take it all back because he owes it in child support. Or people that went to jail for things like marijuana that's now legal in so many states, and they're felons, or they did all of this time in jail and they don't get repaid. So this is why so much of the systems are so important, because it's always been trickery, it's always been technology, it's always been all of these things to reel you in and say, I'm gonna give it to everybody except for you. And then you still have this group of people over here that doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
And they don't, and because they don't have anything, they go out to do something to feel some kind of good way about them. And a spotlight is shined on these people, and everybody says, these are the criminals, these are the, but we don't know about them doing any, I don't know of any neighborhoods in America where Black people were going out and doing having like gang wars and burning down whole towns. And I've never heard of it here, right? But a spotlight is put there. So it's the systems that, you know what I mean, that really needs to take it. And I start to get passionate about this because I grew up on Gates Avenue, which everybody in Brooklyn knows about Gates Avenue. And so many of my people were railroaded because when crack hit, you know, it was the young people. I was young then, but it was the young people that was on crack. So what happens to the generations? This is way past slavery. What happens to the fathers that are going to jail for crack, the mothers that are on crack and can't get off of it, and then the kids that try to take care of themselves as a child, then go into another realm, and then nobody, this whole realm of family cannot take care of themselves. So
Right.
yes, the system has to be addressed because they can't say we're going to pick and choose how we destroyed you. You understand what I'm saying? We can't pick and choose. We destroyed you, but we can't pick and choose. Oh, okay, you was good after slavery. You went to school. You followed, Booker T. Washington. You did, right? We can't pick and choose. And that is a real conversation because there was so many things that was, I read something and it was just, I read it and they were saying that Black men were put in jail after slavery if they didn't have a job.
Yep, vagrancy laws.
That's insane.
Absolutely.
That's insane. You understand? So all of this lead up from then to now, it hasn't stopped. So yes, what Sister Akanke is saying is so real is that it's not just the money, but it's the way how it needs to come with, right? So it's about repairing, not just giving the money, because they could give the money and take it all back. Be like, yo, you owe us money from Section 8. You owe us money from
real talk.
welfare.
You
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's real.
Yeah.
A Native American community that actually I think they got something like $1.3 billion in reparations. And by the time the government finished parsing it out, each individual got something like that. And they gave them, quote unquote, whatever the dollar amount was, they were like, but you don't know enough to control it. You don't know enough to figure out how to disperse it. So it went to a governing,
like a foundation or something.
Right, governing agency. Individuals got about $1,000. The money was absorbed largely by these governing agencies. And it's reparations activists have warned against quick fixes for reparations because they felt like the government, because of just international embarrassment and organizing and pressure, that the government would eventually say, okay, we're going to give you all something, right? But it won't repair.
Right.
There was also a community in the South. I don't remember the name of the township. They also received reparations because after segregation, there was one high school in the town, and once it was illegal, they shut the whole school down. But the white people actually had money to go to private school. So they shut down this entire public high school, and the people in the county sued because there, of course, like the sister Erica said, there's a disparity now because of the lack of education. By the time they won the lawsuit, they were given the cost of a high school education, but you can't do anything with a high school education by the time they won.
Right.
And so people would work on that were like the time, like thinking about what would have been the repair, not just the cost of the high school education, but what the high school education would have afforded you.
Right. I am speechless at like the depth. I think we were successful here. I think we were successful in unpacking some things, and yet and still we just touched the surface for real. You know what I mean? But so only because I know people got to go and all these things. But I do want to give you the last word. I know something is on the tip of your tongue, but just let me say first to thank you. I want to say to those who had to check out, hopefully those in the audience, you'll see this on YouTube sooner than you think. and to say to Rhymefest and also thank you, and to Jamal and Marieke, who are no longer on screen, but to thank you. I think we opened up a lot here. I think we cleansed the palate. I think we dispelled a lot of disinformation. So I'm grateful. So Erica, thank you so much. Nana Osei, thank you so much. Akanke, I love you dearly. Mo, thank you so much. And on that note, let me I need to do a selfless plug. I'm sorry. Speaking of Africa, we have, I don't know when people are going to see this, but on May 13th, the International African Arts Festival has its kickoff celebration here in Brooklyn, which is Saturday, May 13th. So we're going to share this far and wide, and we'll segment this part so you can get your tickets at the website for the International African Arts Festival. And of course, we would love to see you and all of your African beauty at Commodore Barry Park. So I had to do that plug, not just because I'm the publicist for the festival, but because I love the festival, as I know many of us here do. So I wanted to do that. So on that note, if I may, Chief Ayanda, you have something on the tip of your tongue. So can you close us out?
I am honored to be able to close this conversation. I'd like to say what my prayer is, what my hope is. My hope is that we fight for what we deserve. My hope is that we advocate for self. My prayer is that to answer Marieke's question is, do I believe that there are those who should pay? Yes. And I wish we should advocate. I hope that we as a collective advocate for reparations and the payment of what is the offering of acknowledgement that comes with reparations. And at the same time, I pray for us as a collective that we don't need it. I pray for us as a collective that we don't depend on it. I pray for us as a collective that we don't wait for it to happen. I pray for us as a collective that we don't pause in our own growth, evolution, forward motion, and progress, self-advocacy for someone else to justify and give us a sorry, or give us an apology, or give us a token repayment for what they cannot put back in place. So I hope that at the conversation that we take from this is, yes, we advocate, yes, we fight, yes, we demand, yes, we protest, yes, we petition, yes, we challenge, yes, we offer. And at the same time, we do the things for ourselves. That means I don't need you. I don't need your justification. I don't need your affirmation of me as a human being. I don't need it. And that is the way we can, I think, if we work internally and externally at the same time, then as a collective, we'll be in a position that when that time comes, we'll be able to, we can say that we have been made whole. We can say that we have repaired the trauma, because we are not in need of anything outside of ourselves.
There's no better way to close this out than that. I think that was amazing, Baba. Thank you so much, Chief Ayanda. It is the balance in this conversation that was here that you just brought out in words. So I thank you so much. We're gonna close out, family. You're gonna see more of this. I'm gonna end, and I'm going to end, and everybody just stay where you are, but I'm going to close out and send the link. So if you have to go, go, and go well, and go safely, and go with joy in your heart. And may these words, all of the light and the righteousness and the balance and the education and edification of all of the words that were spoken, may they come to bear truth in our lives individually and collectively. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, April.